Hello, fifth graders. Here we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at some of our tools. So this is our goggles. Make sure that we're wearing that. You guys should have looked at our science safety and realized that we do have to wear goggles anytime we use a graduate cylinder or we're using any type of chemicals in our classroom. So this is just for safety for your eyes. So you should have seen that in one of our videos, and when you sign the science safety contract, that's what our goggles are. So I just thought I'd show you that. I'm going to put my goggles on right now because we are going to take a look at some science tools. So some of our science tools that we'll be using today is called a triple beam balance. Now triple beam balance is a scale, and what that does is it will measure the grams. So I'm going to expand this out a little bit so you can see. It will measure the grams of an item. So it's like a scale, but it's going to measure the grams and how much mass, the grams of the mass. So what I'm going to do is I could figure out the scale by using these three indicators to see where the weight is on the scale. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but this is a triple beam balance. Something else that we can measure with scales is a spring scale. And a spring scale is something that you can use to measure the force. It's also measured in grams. The G stands for grams, and it's measured in grams. So when I put more force on it, see how it shows you how much force in grams it takes to move an item or to pull an item or an object. So that's called a spring scale. Another item is that we could measure, another tool that we can use is called a graduate cylinder. And that looks like, I have a large one right here. They come in different sizes, and we measure that in milliliters. Now milliliters, that is the volume. So when I measure it, it is the volume of how much. In volume, we always think about a liquid. So we usually use graduate cylinders for liquid items, and we use the milliliters. Something else we can use, that's one large graduate cylinder. There are also smaller versions that kind of look like this. People might also refer to something like this as a beaker. That's a beaker also. So beakers might be a little bit smaller generally than graduate cylinders, but we still use the milliliters and we still use it to measure volume. Something else we can use to measure is, of course, measuring cups that you can find from home. You probably use this for baking. And here's a measuring cup. Generally, we use it to measure the size of a cup, half a cup, a cup and a half. This goes all the way to 2 cups. And then it goes all the way to a pint. These are also measured in ounces and not milliliters necessarily. But we can also use this, usually on a cup like this, I would use it to measure any type of, we call it measuring cups, but this is for liquid. You can use a measuring cup for flour or even a tablespoon. A tablespoon, we would measure something smaller. So usually dry materials you would use to, like flour, baking soda, cinnamon, that you would use to measure. And this is also, look, it's milliliters right there too, which is kind of cool. Also milliliters, you can measure. These are all measured in milliliters. But tablespoons and teaspoons can come in different sizes. You use them to measure generally smaller items. Usually dry materials. We can also use a ruler This is handy for math, for science, for just measuring things at home. This usually measures lengths, and we usually can measure it in centimeters that go up to inches. Inches and centimeters. And we usually measure the length of an item. Now, we can use a ruler, but there's also called a measuring tape. And generally people use this for fabric at home, but you can also use it as a ruler too. It usually comes rolled. And again, if you look at it carefully, it's that centimeters that you can measure it in. And okay, and that's measuring the length on the rulers or a tape measure. Now, if I want to measure how hot or cold something is, I can always use a thermometer. So here's our thermometer. And when we read a thermometer, we look at the Celsius side right here, which is the C. And I can check to see, or I'm sorry, Fahrenheit side. That's my English background coming in. Right here, you want to check to see what the temperature is. And so you can read it by when the red goes up. And when I take a look at it, and I look carefully, not coming, let's look a little bit closer and see if you can read the temperature. Look, it's around, there you are, that's better. Okay, so let's take a look. So right here is 50, and then it's not quite up to 50 in this room, so it's 51. And these count by twos, so you go 62, 64, it's about 66 degrees in here. Some thermometers count by twos, some count by fives. You just have to check and kind of gauge it when you look at it carefully and see how many lines are in between there. Very cool. Okay, and this is going to tell us how hot or cold something is. And that's the thermometer. And then we also can measure